This is a TalkStation original podcast.
Welcome back to another episode of The Senior Moment. You've got myself, Ryan Kelly, and Lynn Schultz here, and today we're going to talk about Gentiva Hospice Services and what hospice is, how it helps in, unfortunately, all of us are going to die at some point, and how hospice can help us die with dignity. And so we have Natalie and Patrick here to help us in learning about what hospice services are and how it can help in the transition for both the person and their family. So tell us a little bit about what your roles are in hospice, and then we'll talk more about hospice itself.
So I'm the chaplain for Gentiva of Carteret County, and we go not only for the patient, but for the family members to listen, to care, to share comforting words, for the emotional and spiritual support of family members, helping them to look at life of the past, life currently, and what's yet to come, but to know that there's something best to come yet. But the whole family travels on that journey together.
Natalie, what is your role within hospice?
So I am a hospice care consultant. I am typically the first person that families and patients meet. So if we have, like, Miss Lynn or you or Misty reaches out and says, Natalie, we have somebody here at the community we think could benefit from hospice services, you reach out to me. I reach out to the family and just really tell them what services we provide and help bring them on service. So that's kind of my role, working with them, different accounts, doctors, hospitals, communities, skilled nursing facilities, wherever the patient calls home, and educating on hospice, educating the community, educating our providers.
A lot of people, when they hear hospice, think that that is something that you are getting right when you're about to die. But that really isn't the case, and there are a lot of things that go into hospice and what it is. So can you pretend that you're having one of those initial conversations with somebody and explain to the audience kind of exactly what is hospice and what are the benefits that you can get from hospice?
Okay. So first off, hospice is a benefit. I'm glad you used that word, that a lot of people don't realize. It's a benefit that we have all paid for. If you've worked and paid taxes, that lovely Medicare deduction that's on your pay stub, that's what it's going for. It's going to pay for services that are offered through your Medicare Part A. So this is a benefit that you are eligible for once you meet criteria. That criteria being you have a life-limiting illness that if it stays on its normal trajectory, typically that means 6 months or less. With that being said, we do have patients on service that have been on service for longer than 6 months. The way that occurs is you have recertifications. So the first benefit period's 90 days, and then it's 30, 30, 30. And what happens when those benefit periods end, someone comes out, does a face-to-face, make sure that you're still on that declining trajectory. And if so, then you're recertified and you can continue with hospice services. So no, it's not I'm dying next week or I'm dying tomorrow. You know, like I said, we have patients. It's rare, but it happens. We do have patients that have been on service for longer than 6 months.
I think that's the biggest misnomer is, like Ryan said, when you say it might be time for hospice, the family immediately thinks the end is here. And and it's not. So this is a good education here.
I know personally, between Carteret Landing and then the nursing home that I used to have, that I've had residents that they have passed away pretty much immediately after getting onto hospice. And I had one resident at the nursing home that was recertified 8 times. And so they were on hospice services for 4 years, and they were still on hospice when I moved away from the nursing home.
Wow.
So, it really it really is very dependent upon the person. And Patrick, as you said before when we were talking in the hallway, you really only God knows. Only God knows.
That's right.
Yeah.
And many of our patients are in assisted living facilities like Carteret Landing, but many are in their homes as well. And what that does in the home life is the families right there surrounding the family, the patient with love and grace and care, and our nurses and CNAs giving bath and things of that nature, and emotional and spiritual support from the chaplain. And then we have a social worker that comes in to help with the finances and other types of ways that we can support the family with benefits. And it just, everybody relaxes. You no longer have a nurse coming in at 2 o'clock in the morning giving you a sleeping pill if you're in the hospital or other things of that nature. You're back home again. And so people do tend to live longer than if they would stay in a hospital setting or other settings like that.
Can you tell me a little bit about, once somebody goes on to hospice services, what are some of the differences that they may see in changes in how they're cared for? Again, when I think of hospice now, I think of the phrase dying with dignity.
Yep.
So what does it, when you go on to hospice services, how does that transition of care look?
Okay. So once you come on hospice services, we're not going to our doctors or specialists anymore. We're not going to the hospital. Hospice, we are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, even on holidays. So I tell patients and their families to think about it. Something that you would call 911 for, you will then call us. During the day, we have nurses in the office that can field those calls and give you suggestions on what to do until a nurse can get there. After hours, it rolls over. You have a nurse triaging the call and talking families through what to do until a nurse can get there. We do all symptom and medication management at home. So with the goal of keeping them at home, comfortable in their surroundings, and not being, and no, the best word for me is a cold hospital room that they're not familiar with. One thing that we do at Gentiva, of course, our office is out of Swansboro, so we cover all of Carteret County and all of Onslow County. We have a Carteret County team and we have an Onslow County team, with the idea of we're keeping the same nurses, aides, chaplain, social worker, so that family doesn't have different people coming in and out day to day. It's the same team, so we're able to build those relationships, and they're more comfortable because, you know, our staff gets to know them. We tell people we're bringing them into our family, and that's really what we are. We are a big family. Another thing with hospice that people don't realize, you know, if you die in a hospital. Unfortunately, my mom passed in 2020 unexpectedly, and she was in a hospital. So we didn't have the opportunity to have hospice. And my mom was young. And so for me, I had a really hard time dealing with her passing because it was so unexpected. So I had to seek out grief counseling myself, and I had to pay for it out of pocket to get that counseling. So when you come on hospice with us, we provide counseling, grief counseling, bereavement support for up to 13 months after your loved one passes. And that is huge for a family. You know, some of these families are experiencing death for the first time of their loved one, or they've experienced death with friends or friends of friends, but this is the first time that they're dealing with it. I think my first loss was my grandfather in 2006, and he was on hospice. And hospice was huge for us because for my family, that was our first major loss, and we didn't know how to navigate. And so without having hospice, I don't know what we would have done.
I think you also, can you talk a little bit about what you supply if a person goes on hospice?
Yeah, sort of, what are some of the financial benefits of going on to hospice?
So as I said earlier, hospice is a benefit that we've already paid for. So hospice is covered at 100% through a patient's Medicare Part A. In addition to the nursing visits, typically twice a week. The chaplain, the social worker, aides typically come in 2 to 3 times a week. So in addition to getting those services and having that medical support, spiritual support, we also provide supplies that can be incontinence supplies if a patient's incontinent, the pads to go on the bed, equipment, hospital bed, overbed table, wheelchair, walkers, bedside commodes. All of that is equipment that can be provided through the hospice benefit.
And the prescriptions are free.
And the medication coverage. Yep, we cover the medications. We're not one of those hospice agencies that come in and discontinue all meds. Our nurses work with the families, look at the med list. We may have to substitute some medications, but we don't discontinue medications, and we take over that as well.
There really are a lot of great benefits, and financially, again, I know that's a concern for a lot of people, trying to be able to afford a hospital bed or the overbed tables. I mean, that's spectacular to be able to cover that.
And when we do go into places like Carteret Landing, we're just that second level of care for the already great care that you offer, that we come in to support your staff and able to get the medications much quicker and the whole aspect. So it's a great teamwork together.
Definitely. So we're about to take a break, but after the break, Patrick, I want to expand more on when you discussed earlier how people, when they come on services, and it's like an moment. So we'll take a break, and then we'll kind of expand on that a little bit.
Hi, this is Lynn Schultz at Carteret Landing. We invite you to visit our beautiful assisted living community. Carteret Landing pairs exceptional, compassionate senior care with the stylings of a resort. Our beautifully appointed suites, common areas, and bright and engaging memory care neighborhood can provide you or your loved one with the quality living they deserve. Carteret Landing is in Morehead City, right behind the Friendly Market. Come by and see us today or call for your personal tour at 252-773-0980.
Welcome back to The Senior Moment with Lynn Schultz and myself, Ryan Kelly. And today we have Patrick and Natalie from Gentiva Hospice, and we are talking about what is hospice, what are hospice services, how do you qualify for hospice. And before the break, one of the things that Patrick had mentioned was just how sort of a sense of, I don't want to say relaxation, but a sense of peace. Thank you. That's the exact word I was looking for. A sense of peace that overcomes the family and the resident or patient when you all come in and start helping them. So can you tell me, what is it how do you help them with both the acceptance and sort of the path that they're on at this point?
As a pastor, I come as a friend to start with, trying to meet the needs of the patient and all the family members exactly where they're at. I know what I believe. I know that Jesus Christ is Lord and Savior, but not everybody's there yet. So it really is that listening aspect of sharing, and that listening is critical in doing that. And then it's finding those commonalities. Where do they gain their strength from? Do they have a faith background? If so, what faith? And with the different denominations and Catholic faith, we all look at things a little bit differently. And so it's hearing their background and what gives them the most comfort. And so that listening, again, very critical in that. It's also helping people to see what death is. For Christians, it's the beginning of a second life, our eternal life. And throughout the Holy Scriptures, that's what God points us to each and every day, is knowing heaven and that we'll live for all eternity. For other backgrounds, it's not exactly that same way. So you find those things that are most comforting to families. And it's enabling family members and the patient to tell stories and their stories of life, and they're sharing life together with family members. And what are those steps necessary for them to come to resolution on some things, to realize that there is going to be an end. And I hadn't heard anybody saying, well, I'm ready for it today. I'm ready to go to heaven, just not today. Let it be tomorrow or next week. And next week comes and they're still not quite ready. But through the dying process, and when it's a controlled type situation, and you do have the whole team there, and if you're an assisted living facility, that team there, that people come to realize there is something better than what it is. And the patient begin to release and let go of some of those fears that they have. Family members start looking at other possibilities of life. And so, but it's a whole process type thing. And it's that anticipatory grieving that's difficult with a lot of people, because the worry of what's going to happen is more difficult than what really does happen. So it's listening to all that and sharing those comforting words and scriptures and other resources that are out there, and helping to get people to that point.
I really liked when you said that you help in facilitating conversations. And I mean, in our culture, death really isn't something that we talk about. We don't talk about death, we don't talk about religion, we don't talk about finances. But it's such an important conversation, but because we don't talk about it, we don't know how to. And with experts in this field, being you all, helping, I can imagine that you've had some great conversations in trying to help and facilitate between family members. Do you have any examples that you can share of?
I can name several specific, but I won't do the specific, but of family members that hadn't spoken to each other in many, many, many years. And the patient allows me to give a phone call to those family members. Sometimes they don't come, but most of the time they come and resolve those issues beforehand. It's finding that way that we can give peace. We had one gentleman that, and especially for men, they have a checklist, mental checklist of who they've talked to and who hasn't shown up yet. And so it's listening to them. But this one gentleman kept on saying that there was somebody else, and nobody in the family could figure out who it was. Well, it was a grandson who lived in Australia. And so they called by FaceTime, and that grandson and the grandfather talked with each other, and the grandfather went to heaven the moment that conversation ended. And so truly building those relationships and hearing everybody that needs to be a part of that, and giving peace to that, having people give those final goodbyes. In many cases, we hope, whether it's a birthday close, like one that happened at Carteret Landing here recently, or other situations, and me sharing with them, let's have an event in which their friends and family can come and they can talk to each other while they're still alive and appreciate one another. And that makes that end-of-life process easier on everybody. So it's just discovering those ways to help best make that happen.
Natalie, you mentioned earlier about your personal experience with hospice services. You said 13 months, but tell me, when the patient actually passes away, like you said, things don't just stop. What happens at that point from when the resident passes away? How do you help with funerals and memorials and then the family themselves that are in the grieving process?
I'm probably going to divert this to Patrick,
Okay,
because he is more involved in that aspect. So, Patrick, I'm going to let you take that one away.
One of the things that we do at the home or at the facility is to have a time of prayer, reading scriptures or whatever's most important for the family at that time, and having the family members share stories once again through that period. For our veterans, we always have a flag with us, and as the funeral home comes, that hospice people always will stay there. And if it's a veteran, that we have a flag that we put over the body and do a little ceremony and saying thank you from America and from the facility and from our hospice for the service that they've given, but try to give as much dignity as possible at that moment. We always call the family the day after and the second day after to see how they're doing, and as Natalie says, for the next 13 months. That I'm there with them for the next week or so. There's many, many celebration of life services that I do, and especially those that do not have a church home or a church background, because everybody wants that. But others, I mean, it's speaking with their pastors, and we've already formed a relationship with their pastors that I've called and giving them updates on how their patients, their families are doing through that process. Every October, we have a memorial service that we invite. With hospice, I can't share anybody's name or even the family name or anything with anybody else. And so it's at the memorial service that we come together in a park type setting. And it's a marvelous event. So all the families that we've had the past year, in which their loved ones have gone to heaven, gather. And again, we have an opportunity of share, but they share with one another. They share their grief, but also the joys that they've learned in life and the remembrances of who that person was and how it's affected our life today, and for them to go on and move on.
Yeah. And this past year's memorial service, and the one that I participated in, because my mother-in-law was actually on service with Gentiva 8 years ago now. It's been almost 8 years ago. And I can remember from her memorial service, but just hearing the families, we know what we do. And I will say for everyone on our team, we're all truly here because we have a calling and we have a passion for hospice. But to hear those families share about their loved ones, and then to just hear the way our team goes above and beyond for some of these families, and and it's not for accolades. They kind of sit, some of these stories we never even know until that family member brings it up, or that community, staff mentions, Nurse Maggie did this, or, so, and to just hear some of the things that they do, it's just amazing what our staff does and goes above and beyond for these families, and hearing those families talk about how much our staff means to them, and, what this hospice experience has done for them. So
We sadly just had a resident pass away. And Patrick was there, and I think Maggie was there. And afterwards, the family reflected to me that they had no idea, and it was so beautiful. She goes, "We had no idea how the end would be, what exactly would happen at the end." And she said it was just so beautiful that you walked them through everything, you were there for them, support for them, and it's just like you said, it's just somebody sounding out of how wonderful that it helped so much.
And for me, that last breath is the greatest day in our life, because we know we're going to heaven to be with Jesus for all eternity, or whatever faith experience that you represent.
What would be the next step for somebody who wants to learn more about hospice?
So if somebody out there wants to learn more about hospice, you can Google hospice services. We have tons of great Google reviews. I encourage, I work for Gentiva. I think we're the best in the field. I know we're the best in the field. But of course, for somebody looking out, they're like, well, you work there. Of course you're going to say that. So I tell them, go on Google, look at the reviews. You can call the office and reach out to the office, and whether you're in Carteret County or in Onslow County. If you're in Carteret County, of course, they're going to forward you to me, and we can meet wherever in the comfort of your home. If you want to meet for lunch, if you just want to talk on the phone, we can discuss hospice services. If you're in Onslow County, by chance, then it would be Tiffany. She's my teammate. But I always say start with Google. Do your research. If you're going to Google what you're going to eat for dinner, why would you not Google, and look at the reviews?
Well, I want to thank you all for coming in today. Thank you for the education. And again, for those who are interested in learning or reaching the point of needing hospice services, please gentiva.com.
Yep.
And you'll be
gentiva.com.
able to get all of the phone numbers that are necessary.